clear of the closing doors, please.
Welcome to Subway Sports Talk. My name is Peter Kennedy, and I am your host. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning into SST on Apple Podcasts app, Spotify, and on YouTube. Joining me today to talk NBA draft for what we perceive as the third time we're talking NBA draft on this very podcast, which is exciting. And it's a shame that I talk to him more about this than other stuff because it excites us both so much. It's Glynn Johnson. Glynn Johnson, my friend. It's NBA draft season, a season we both enjoy greatly. So how are you today, my friend?
Nothing excites me more than my once a year SST appearance, talk NBA draft. It's crazy that it's tomorrow.
it like every single year. You think at this point we'd like be ready for it, but every single year, especially since they kind of tightened it up a little bit in the past couple, it's like, oh, the NBA playoffs are going on. This is dope. Enjoying the playoffs. Oh my God, we have a new champion. And then like, oh my God, the draft's like next week. It's tomorrow. Like it's so soon. It happens every single year.
I think we just get so used to the NFL draft being like a couple months after, 2 months after the Super Bowl that it's kind of this precedent that we're used to, but it's like 2 weeks for the NBA.
I mean, it was crazy. The Nuggets actually made a trade during the NBA Finals, which is just like, that's bonkers. That shouldn't happen. Now, thankfully, there was no players. Imagine you're a player on the Nuggets and you get traded in the finals. I don't think that's allowed, first of all. It's definitely not allowed. But they did trade a draft pick for other draft picks with OKC, I believe, which is just hilarious that the GM of the team is still doing his job, and his job is to look 6 weeks ahead probably at all times. So if not 6 years ahead for that matter. But they're in the finals. They make a trade. They win the finals. They make more trades. They have a bunch of picks now this year, and they might lose some pieces. We're going to talk about all that stuff here, right? And what's really cool about this NBA draft season, Glenn, is not only do we have a bunch of prospects to talk about, but we have 2 trades to talk about and a couple other trades that could happen between the time we're recording and the time we finish recording, let alone tomorrow night, Thursday night. This will be tonight for people listening, or Friday, Saturday, Sunday, etc., on to free agency. So there's so much to talk about. Real quick, I just want to touch this up before we get into the thick of it here. Subway Sports Talk, Apple Podcast, Spotify, you know what to do. Subscribe, rate, and review. Much appreciated. Anyone who supports the show via the podcast app that you listen on, those reviews help a ton. Sharing it with your friends helps a ton. Also on YouTube, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you know when new episodes come out, as well as leave a comment on said YouTube videos. That helps tremendously. In social media, Subway Sports Talk on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Trying to do more with that, but you've heard me say that before, so maybe I'll be truthful this time and actually do it more and more and more, because social needs to be better. That's on me. I'll take it. I'll wear that one. But now Glynn Johnson's here. We're talking about all the NBA draft stuff in a minute. Before that, it is important to talk about these trades. We know Bradley Beal and Chris Paul were flopped just earlier in the week. Now, a few hours before we start recording on Wednesday night, Glenn, a Northeast masshole. Can we call you that? Are you a masshole? Is that valid?
If you're from Massachusetts and you don't consider yourself a masshole, it's just like a huge red flag.
That makes you more of a masshole.
To answer your question.
That makes you more of a masshole. If you say that you're not, you definitely are. If you say that you are, there's a chance you're not, even if you still are. That's what we're going to go with. But you are from Mass. You are a Celtics fan. Obviously, you're an NBA fan at large as well, so you have more takes. But specifically, your team was involved in what would have been called a blockbuster maybe 5 years ago. Today, it's not quite a blockbuster, but is a big-time move and a big decision by this front office and Brad Stevens. So Porzingis heading up to the Boston Celtics, a couple things heading down to Washington. There's a lot of moving parts here. It's not officially official, if I'm not mistaken, correct, right? Is that right, Glenn?
Yeah, I don't think so. I feel like all the trades around draft night need to get approved by the league a day or two after. So,
yeah, I think that's correct. So we'll see what the final package is. I know there's a lot of things with the opt-in on Porzingis' side with his contract, if he's going to become a free agent or not, if that's going to be a thing here. So there's a lot of things to talk about. But from a big picture standpoint and from a team building standpoint, I just did a whole podcast talking about what teams are going to do in this offseason with that luxury tax staring them in the face and not being able to use their mid-level exception if they hit that. And now it's another contract coming to Boston with Porzingis, a guy who did have a good year last year, shot the ball well, can still protect the rim a little bit. He was a positive player on a bad Washington team. However, I hear that trade, Glenn, and I think about Jaylen Brown and what that might mean for him. Now, you texted me back and said, don't put that into the world. So what's your initial reaction to this Porzingis news? And then what's your big picture Celtics reaction to what's going to happen moving forward for this offseason?
Yeah, I think like any like passionate NBA fan, regardless of what teams are involved in a trade, you always think about like the fit. How do these players fit together? With the Brad Beal trade, how does he fit with Devin Booker and KD? How does Porzingis fit on the Celtics? But I think something that you and I would agree with that separates like casual NBA fans from a little bit more hardcore fans is like understanding the salary cap, like ramifications of trades. Like me, for one, knowing that like the Celtics were already up there in Brogdon. Malcolm Brogdon was already, I think, at like $22 million a year, and Porzingis, if he opts in, is now a $35 million a year guy. And never mind if we extend him, it worries me about the future with obviously the salary cap is going up and everything, but they just published it actually a little bit before we joined this pod. It went up like $2 million a year, like for next year. So it's not drastic numbers. And there's a lot of teams out there that like having 3 players or more that are in the 30 mil a season for salary makes it really tough to build the rest of your team. Like with the Celtics trade, it immediately made me think the Celtics will not be re-signing Grant Williams. That's definitely off the table now. Not saying it necessarily was without this trade, but I think it makes the future really cloudy of like what they're going to do.
Yeah, it's really strange because in a vacuum, you put Grant Williams and Kristaps Porzingis next to each other, and I mean, you got to take Porzingis almost 10 times out of 10. I mean, you can argue about the defense for Grant Williams being a little more physical, being that gritty guy, but I don't know how you feel as a Celtics fan, as a guy who watches that team more than I do and watches them with a rooting interest rather than, I'm not saying I root against them all the time, but I'm not necessarily rooting for them all the time. Grant Williams annoys the hell out of me, and it looks like he annoys his teammates sometimes. I think that's a win, but obviously, like you said, the $36 million versus what Grant might get in free agency here, which is going to be anywhere between $6 and $18 million in reality, which is crazy. Like, I think that's still a win. You thought about Grant Williams. I thought about Jaylen Brown, because now you're talking about building a team with a paid Jason Tatum, a paid Kristaps Porzingis, and a paid Jaylen Brown. Now, yes, you can wait to pay Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum another year or two, respectively there. But Jaylen Brown already seems like he kind of wants that extension and won't be happy if he's in Boston without the extension. He kind of might want to leave anyway. So that comes into play here. And does that Jaylen Brown part of it come into your mind there and make you nervous about him staying or going?
I think one thing that I do remind myself too, I know like this time of year, like you never know what rumors have any sort of truth behind them. I know there was talks that like Celtics already in talks with Porzingis about extension, which like, who knows? Like maybe they try to do a 1-year rental and really try to push it for a finals run. I know you and I were texting about this before, but like Celtics this past year, I'm not saying they were one of the best 3-point shooting teams. I don't know the rankings of the best 3-point shooting, but they were up there for the most 3-pointers attempted, where I think Porzingis really helps push that mold even further. Which is definitely a little bit of a difference between Mazzulla and Ime Udoka, which we don't even need to go into that. But we really don't know what it will turn into. Like, I personally love Jaylen Brown. He's just like such a smart, dedicated, passionate guy. And I think actually, contrary to your point a little bit as a Celtics fan, like Grant Williams is actually beloved by like his teammates and organization. Like he was the kind of glue between. You disagree?
No,
like,
I just roll my eyes.
It's just funny, but I like obviously I follow the Celtics on social media and stuff, and like he's the kind of clown on the bus ride who like lightens the mood when like some of the veterans might be a little bit more uptight about something. Like even though Blake Griffin was irrelevant to the team, like him and Blake like kind of were the kind of like what they were on the team, like from a position perspective of like they were like bottom, like middle, like Grant obviously played a little bit, Blake was bottom of the bench, but like they kind of connected the bottom of the bench crew, the second, third stringers with like the starters on a more like team and synergy level. So
yeah, no, that's totally fair. It's really just one of those things that when you watch them, it looks like from the outside perspective. Like if you're on the outside perspective of just an actual Celtics fan, I'm on the outside because
Totally.
I'm not a Celtics fan, so I'm not looking at their social media and all that crap. It just looks like when he pulls some antics on the floor, his teammates are more like, yo, Grant, come on, dude. Rather than, yo, that's my guy, I'm going to back him up. Right? And that's just kind of an outside perspective. And that's just me kind of being a Grant Williams hater because he can frustrate me with some of the things he does on the court sometimes. And I think that's kind of fair, even if, the Celtics fans and you guys might be more on point about what he actually brings day to day, because you can't deny his energy. You can't deny what he does on the court for the most part, even though obviously jarring down Jimmy Butler was a big mistake, and we know that to be true. But yeah, that's one minor example.
I think, and I have no evidence of this because there's no way you can prove it, but I think he got a lot of his stuff from Marcus Smart.
Yeah.
But Marcus Smart, what he does on defense to be annoying, but Marcus Smart has a little bit more to back it.
A little more gravitas.
Especially defensively. But
yeah.
That's why Grant Williams, you can do one of their flops side by side, and Grant Williams' flop probably looks exactly identical to Marcus Smart's flop.
100%. So yeah, I guess the thing with Grant Williams being gone, it's something that you could live with. Maybe you'll miss him, but from a basketball perspective, he's replaceable for sure.
Apparently at one point in the season, he was asking for $20 million a year, which is just that's starter money, and you're not that. I know you said 6 to 18, but I think realistically it's more 12 to 18.
Right.
And depending on just if a team will pay it. I know he just got some surgery, so that might affect it too.
Yeah, and also, he didn't exactly look great in the playoffs. Neither did Jaylen Brown, right? So from a Knicks perspective and other teams around the league perspective, obviously Jaylen Brown's a guy who's been talked about a ton. You are in the Celtics camp that you don't want to get off of him. You still want to keep Brown and Tatum together. That makes sense. You've been to all these conference finals. Is it Brown and Tatum problem that you haven't been over the hump yet? Or is it a point guard problem, a big problem, a coaching problem? You can point to a lot of different things here, right? They've never had a true point guard. So I totally get the idea of wanting to keep Jaylen Brown in Boston. However, these rumors are obvious. They're not just smoke. There is probably some sort of ember there if it's not a full raged fire. But moving off him would likely bring back some sort of piece that can help this team move forward. However, again, these trades are hard to find this year. And now I've been proven wrong already with the Brad Beal, Chris Paul thing, proven wrong with Porzingis moving. So maybe those trades are a little bit more obvious for Jaylen Brown than I'm letting on. What is the type of haul back that would make you pleased or make you understand about Jaylen Brown moving outside of the idea that he just wants out, so we let him leave because he wants to?
That's a tough question. Because again, kind of what we were talking about earlier, there's obviously what you want from a player perspective, but at the end of the day, it's all about what the salaries turn out to be. There's so many great players that now there's talks about DeAndre Hunter on the Hawks potentially being traded. And when he was on his rookie deal, any team would have loved to have him. But now at $20 million a year, a lot of people are with what I can build around me, it's not really worth it. And I'll say one thing that I think we actually may have talked about in the past that I was wrong about is Derek White, for example. Before this year, I was he's not worth the money. Now he's starting to look like a good value.
Yeah.
So
Derek
it's really
White
hard to put an exact picks or players for return, but
Malcolm Brogdon looked like he was worth it until he got hurt, which is why he was got at the price he was got, right? He would have been sold for a lot higher price if he was never injury prone. He might have not been sold at all, but he was great until he was banged up. And Derek White was obviously also very good for you guys in the playoffs. Maybe needed to be gone to a little bit more, you can argue. Let me give you one hypothetical here. Just as you are the Celtics man, I'm a Knicks man. I'm wearing a Knicks shirt right now, which doesn't happen often, but I am. Here's a hypothetical for you. R.J. Barrett, Obi Toppin, and picks. I don't know. 2 unprotected picks, let's say, for Jaylen Brown. Who says no?
Me.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of how I would feel too. But that's that's a trade that, as an unbiased guy, and and everyone who listens to this hopefully knows, I try to be unbiased when talking about the Knicks. I think I do a decent job at that. I don't know what more you're getting for this guy who is an asset probably at the lowest stock he's ever been, who you might not be able to afford. You know what I mean?
I was going to say, that was my fan reaction, less than if I, again, saw all the salaries on paper and all that, I'm sure I'd probably have a little bit different of opinion, but just like, I think a lot of times, like you saw what like Bradley Beal's return, like everyone thinks you're going to get this massive haul, even across like the NFL too. Like you think you're going to get this massive haul for like, I don't have a good example, but then it's like, oh, you get like in the NFL, like a 4th or 5th round pick for this guy. And
it ends up not being what you think what you think it's going to be. It happens all the time, unfortunately. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen with Jaylen Brown. Let's just quickly hit a few other names, and maybe it's Quickly, right? Maybe it is Emmanuel Quickly and RJ Barrett. Maybe that makes you feel a bit better about it. I don't know. But whatever. Jaylen Brown is going to be one of the talking points until he's either extended, committed to next year, or traded. That's just, unfortunately, the fact of the matter with where he's at and where the Celtics are at. On to some of these other names. Zion's been brought up a lot. Damian Lillard's brought up a lot. Pascal Siakam's brought up a lot. There are people out there who are looked at as maybe not top. Well, Zion could be looked at as a top 10 player, though he doesn't play very much. Maybe not top 10 type pieces, but top 25, top 30, top 40 pieces in the NBA right now who are going to be possibly on the move. Is there any one person in particular who you see in that upper echelon who's going to end up being on another team next year, or maybe be part of some big trade here on draft night?
All the names you brought up are certainly out there. Like, it's really hard to predict because I probably wouldn't have predicted Brad getting traded last week. I think just one thing for the Miami Heat fans out there that really want Damian Lillard, it's like when you look at the numbers on paper, when it comes to, it's like tough to pull off. Like this guy 4 years from now, Damian Lillard in his age 36 season has a $65 million a year salary, which is Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown now, not in 4 years, based on their current salaries, or like potentially even like 3 decent good starters or 6 men. So that's just like, I think he's going to be really hard to move with his salary.
Yeah, the Dame thing is so tough. We'll get more into it when we get to Scoot Henderson and Brandon Miller and that draft pick, right? With 2-3 and Charlotte and Portland being in the mix there. It's like, it's insanely weird to think about Damian Lillard saying, yep, Scoot Henderson, come on in. We're going to compete now, right? Like, it's hard to imagine that that's going to work for Damian Lillard. It's hard to imagine that's going to work for Portland. And I just think about Damian Lillard, and this is my point of the whole podcast I did on Tuesday that came out. A lot of these moves end up being question marks. None of these moves are surefire moves. If you grab Damian Lillard and you're the Brooklyn Nets, which is another rumored spot that could afford him, has some pieces, etc., like, what do you become with Damian Lillard? Portland West. And you're still like a 6 through 10 seed at best, and you're not going to the finals. Like, is there a point to even doing that? For Miami, it makes sense because they've been so close. But like you said, the numbers just don't add up. Zion, obviously, the question marks off the court. His injury health is also a question mark. You got some weird stuff going on in Dallas and Kyrie Irving and his availability or maybe not availability. Like, it's just one of these crazy off seasons that I can see a couple trades coming out of the woodworks and being like, oh my God, I can't believe that just happened. And we're texting each other like, yo, did you see Twitter? Right? And then you could also imagine an offseason where a lot of these guys end up not being moved because none of the moves really make sense. Like, there was a tweet about Zach LaVine to the Knicks today. That doesn't excite me very much. Like, does that actually move the needle? Does giving up stuff for Zach LaVine make the Knicks a team that can actually go to the 4-3-2 seed range, or are they still a 5-8 seed? Right? Like, I don't know. What's the point of that? What's the point of everything here? I'm not really sure. So what the point of this podcast is, though, Glenn, is to talk about the NBA prospects here. And I'm sure as we talk about some of these teams in the mock draft style, maybe some more of these ideas will pop up about trades and different fits across the league and all that fun stuff. So let's just get it out of the way. We're going to go more top to bottom. We're going to talk about a lot of these lottery guys. That's what people want to hear about. That's what's more important to a lot of these teams. And, of course, that's going to start with the one and only Victor Wembanyama, who I feel like, Glenn, we can just shake our heads yes and move on if we really wanted to.
Yes, I think at this point everyone knows about him. So it was fun to talk about him, though, like 2-3 years ago. Like,
right, as this hypothetical unicorn. But now we sit here and we're like, Victor Wembanyama, yes, he's amazing. He's on the Spurs. They have cap space. They can be sneaky interesting this season. sneaky interesting this season, let alone, we're not talking about a top 4 seed, but maybe a little play-in juice. I don't know. But let me just ask you this so we can move on from Victor. The hype is the hype. It's real. There's no reason to question that he's going number 1 or that he's not going to be a bust. Obviously, you can come out here with a hot take and say he's going to break his leg and it's going to be all over for him, but that's stupid, unfair, and we're not going to do that. So, really quick, let me just ask you this question. Year 1, people are talking about his impact to be a 20-10, 4-block-a-game guy. Is there a level of you that starts to say, okay, let's not talk about this guy as an all-NBA level center before he's played a game? Or do you say, no, this dude's about to average 20, 10, and 4?
No, great question. I actually think, based on the NBA in today's day and age, but also the team that he's going to, and I could be wrong, but I think the Spurs, I don't think are going to be pouring on over 30 minutes for him. I wouldn't be shocked if at the end of the season, he averages 28 minutes a game, which again, he still could have some crazy numbers. I think probably his, a lot of tall, athletic defenders have great block numbers in their early years. So I could see him having some pretty crazy defensive numbers. But it really depends on how much the Spurs kind of unleash him and don't try to push him to the limit until they really feel comfortable that he's hit the weight room in the right way and will have the stamina to make it throughout the season. I again could be wrong, but that's one of my hypotheses with him.
Yeah, and I think that's fair, right? To say, I think the thing that you just said, I actually haven't heard many people saying that, which goes to your kind of good instincts on this draft stuff here. Really, really high chance that they don't put a big burden on him this year. I don't think we're going to see Wembanyama playing 38 minutes very frequently, and I think that's the right thing to do. They want to be competitive now. They want to put a good performance out this year. They're not going to be tanking again like they have in the last 2 seasons. But to say they're going to now go all in and play him 38 minutes a game is absolutely unrealistic, and you're spot on. I'm thrilled to watch him play, and that's all we have to say about him. He's a freaking freak of nature. He seems like a rock-solid dude as well. As a person, he seems rock solid. He seems motivated. He seems like he has a good head on his shoulders, good team around him. And that's all you have to say about Victor Wembanyama. And now we'll start the real NBA draft talk, because that's all you have to say about Victor, right? So let me preface you before we get into the number 2 pick here and, what's going to happen with Charlotte and Portland. I'll preface you by saying I think it was before the college season even started. You were talking to me about Brandon Miller. You were saying this guy's going to rise up the ranks.
Yeah.
Maybe so the first couple weeks maybe of the college season, the latest I think it was. And you're texting me, this guy is going to rise up the ranks. He's going to be a number one, aka after Victor Wembanyama type player, and you were right. I mean, he was incredible. He moved right up those ranks. He was number 2, number 3 all year long. Scoot Henderson obviously has the hype he has as well. So with your early adaptation of Brandon Miller, and obviously with the off-court stuff that happened, that's kind of swept under the rug at this point a little bit, how are you feeling now about the Miller-Scoot Henderson conversation? Is Brandon Miller still your guy, and do you still look at him as the rightful number 2 pick in this draft?
Yeah, great question. Because I do a little bit fall in love with the lanky wing scorers and how much they mean to teams. Obviously, everyone compares, the epitome of that is Kevin Durant, but then you have the leading scorers on teams that are just these dominant players that also have playoff success. I say that in quotes because at least getting to the playoff, not necessarily always winning championships, but you have LeBron, you have Jason Tatum, you have these wings that do so much. So I do kind of fall in love. Yeah, Paul George, Kawhi, kind of fall in love with these players of if you're investing a top pick, oftentimes that might bring better success than Damian Lillard. I love the guy, but has he really gotten to the playoffs on a consistent basis? Guards that are all-stars, all-pro don't always have the same impact on the team. So it's a little bit challenging to compare the two, because we even talked about Scoot Henderson last year. I love Scoot Henderson too, don't get me wrong. But I think just the outlook of building around a player is a little bit stronger when you have a wing that can create their own shot, shoots the ball well, and get to the bucket. Like all things Brandon Miller does well. I really fell in love with Jabari Smith last year. Like, and don't get me wrong, obviously Paulo had a better rookie season, but I really think like Jabari also was one of the youngest guys in the draft last year. I think it's not over for him of like realizing his maximum potential. Because I think Scoot Henderson might have better statistics than Brandon Miller his rookie year. But yeah.
So that means you're sticking with Brandon Miller.
I think yes for the Hornets, but I would not be shocked. Like I think I don't have a draft board right now, but like I probably would have Scoot over Brandon Miller. But I think they're close enough that like the Hornets can take a little bit for positional fit.
Right. Yeah, and I think that comes into it. Obviously, mock draft versus big board, right? The LaMelo Ball, Scoot Henderson fit versus the Brandon Miller LaMelo Ball fit. And LaMelo, obviously, with an injury right now, comes into play. And what the Hornets want to do, new ownership, yada, yada, yada. All that stuff comes into play. So, to me, I also tend to fall in love with the wings who can do a lot of things. And Brandon Miller fits that, right? Like, he is one of those guys who you look at, and he just checks every single box. He's long. He's 6'9" with a 6'11" wingspan. He can shoot the lights out. He can make his own shot. He could play make a little bit. Like, he does all the things that you would want a forward like that to do. Kevin O'Connor put Paul George as one of the shades of comparisons there. I mean, it makes just a ton of sense. So Brandon Miller looks like a surefire, high-floor type player. What I've been hearing and what I read the most about with Scoot Henderson versus Brandon Miller is you get to the personality traits. And not that Brandon Miller's is a negative, but it's a testament to Scoot Henderson's, which is just such a huge positive. People talk about this guy like he's an absolute dog, workhorse, gym rat, all those things that you want to hear about a prospect, you hear about Scoot Henderson. And as a team, especially one with new ownership or with GMs, fighting for their life as a GM in the NBA, it's kind of hard to pass up on that. But I 100% agree with you. You look at some of the guards in the league here, we're loaded with great guards. The success that those guys have in the playoffs is very variable. There's only a few guards who have been the best players on championship teams, and that's literally like Steph Curry, right? Like, I'm talking about smaller guards. So I'm not talking about like your stereotypical two guard like a Brown or a Tatum who, they're basically threes at this point in the NBA. So De'Aaron Fox, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Jamal Murray's a clear two, but those types of guys, seeing them as number ones is quite difficult. So to pair Scoot with LaMelo Ball or to pair Scoot with Damian Lillard or Anthony Simons, if that moves, you're not looking at a complete team, right? And that's why I loved Paolo Banchero last year so much, because I looked at him as a true playmaking forward who can get buckets. And that's kind of what he proved to be. Jabari Smith isn't necessarily a playmaker, but he's one of those guys who's going to give you so much on multiple facets of the game. His shot's going to come around. He got a lot better as the season went on. So I get nervous about that too. If I was a GM, though, I would end up probably going with Scoot, because he seems like one of those guys that you'll kick yourself over if he is just a dog at the next level, when he is just grinding people out. The strength is unmatched. The first step is elite. He's a great finisher around the rim. At the G League, I mean, he was like 58% around the rim, which is just incredible for a guard, right? So I think I'd put Scoot right over Brandon Miller on a straight-up big board. But from the perspective of these two teams, it comes down to, does Charlotte want to move LaMelo? Does Portland want to move Damian Lillard? And to me, I honestly think that the Portland Trailblazers for a long time have said, we don't want to lose Dame. He wants to stay here. Guess what? Now, if I'm Portland, I want to get off Dame. That's how I feel. So if I'm Portland, I'm rooting for them to take Brandon Miller so I could trade Damian Lillard and move on with my franchise. And that is harsh. That sucks, because Damian Lillard's awesome. He has one of the highest approval ratings in the NBA. Everyone loves Dame Lillard. But like we said before, what are you accomplishing with that guy at this age with that salary number? Not a lot. So I'm trying to get off LaMelo. Well, maybe not get off LaMelo with Scoot. That might fit better because LaMelo's size. I'm trying to get off Dame, get Scoot, and figure it out moving forward. That's where I land. I put Scoot ahead, but I think Brandon Miller might go ahead.
I think one thing though that hasn't been talked about, like at least I haven't read it anywhere, and I'm not sure if you have, is that like I personally don't think that Scoot and LaMelo can't play well together. Like I see more challenges of Scoot and Dame, but like I see LaMelo and Scoot like being able to function fine together. So that's why I really think it could go either way at number 2. I will say, kind of pivoting a little bit, is like, I don't know if you saw some of the rumors from a week or two ago of like the Pelicans were really in love with Scoot. Like they were interested in trading up to 2. Like I personally would love to see that. Like obviously I think trading up, what are they, 14? Like they would have to probably throw on Zion or Ingram with that pick. But like, I think the Pelicans are just dying for like a great point guard, which is why I think they fell in love with Scoot. And like Scoot obviously could play with CJ McCollum like phenomenally well. I don't see that trade end up happening, but it's like a really fun one that I've seen the last couple weeks.
I love it. I think they should do it. I think the Pelicans should do it. I think the Hornets should do it. The Hornets are going nowhere fast. Best case scenario for the Charlotte Hornets right now. They get Scoot or Brandon Miller, and they hit their absolute ceiling. They're still not a good team, right? But if they hit Zion Williamson and he's healthy, they're a good team because Zion is that freaking good. And the Pelicans and David Griffin might just want to get out of the Zion Williamson business. And they could be a good team with Scoot and CJ and Ingram and whoever else they still have because they have a deep team down in New Orleans. We saw them play incredibly well before Zion got hurt, and Brandon Ingram was hurt as well. I'd love to see it. I mean, if you're Charlotte, you are revamping your franchise, giving them hope, and if, God damn it, if he plays 60 games a year, you might just be a playoff team again with Zion Williamson. And can you imagine the passes from LaMelo to Zion? I mean, that's electric factory right there.
If you were the Pelicans, though, Pete, question, though, would you be more willing to trade Zion? Obviously, there's the current injury concerns there, or would you be more willing to trade Brandon Ingram?
I'm trading
I didn't
Zion.
even realize this until the other day. Brandon Ingram had 6 assists a game last year.
Yeah, I'm trading Zion.
Yeah.
I am trading Zion. I think Brandon Ingram's an all-star caliber player. I think with Scoot Henderson, you're now looking at a complete team down in New Orleans, and you're not looking for CJ McCollum to be a point guard and a shooting guard at 100% every single game because that's what they were asking him to do. And his scoring took a hit last year, right? He didn't shoot the ball well because he was in an unfamiliar position. I am
if
getting
you were the
out of
Pelicans,
the Zion
though,
business.
Would you trade Brandon Ingram for the number 2 pick?
If you're saying both, if the Charlotte Hornets were like, we'll take either one, we'll take Zion or Ingram for the number 2.
What if they said no to Zion? We'll take Brandon Ingram in the 14th overall pick for the number 2 overall pick. Would you do it as the Pelicans?
I honestly find that more challenging just because your likelihood of Ingram staying healthy is so much higher than Zion, right? So your bottom out potential is much higher with Scoot and Zion than it is with Scoot and Ingram. Because Ingram's had his own injury concerns, right? But he's going to play 65 games a year, most likely. I mean, he's played a lot more than that in his career. But last year he was a little banged up for a stretch. So I honestly, I would move Zion first. I really would. And I think that's crazy to say.
Let's say Charlotte says no to Zion.
Okay.
We'll do Brandon Ingram.
I think that you probably end up saying no to that. I think you say no to that because at 14, which we'll get to in a little while, there are some players who might just be hanging around who can help your team. Now, I don't think it's a great likelihood that you get a surefire starting point guard at 14. Obviously, it's possible, but it is not a great likelihood, right? So, just looking quickly through those numbers, you get the Jalen Hood-Schifino, you maybe get a Kobe Buffkin who's still around. He's all over the place on mock drafts, right? He's as high as like 7, as low as 18 in different places. So if he's there, and now you get Kobe Buffkin, who again we'll talk about more later, I'd rather have Buffkin, McCollum, Ingram, and Zion than Scoot and Zion, if that makes sense. So that's kind of where I'm landing on that front. All right, well, let's move on from there. We like Scoot. I mean, we all know about Scoot and Brandon Miller and Wembenyama. The guys who we don't know as much about, Glenn, and I'm going to give you a couple names, and I want you to kind of pick who you want to talk about most. Maybe not because you think they're the highest on the board, but maybe because you think they're the most interesting. I'll leave that to you. You got the Thomson twins. You got Cam Whitmore Jarace Walker, Anthony Black, those are kind of the guys who are in range for 4 through 8, right? You can probably play around with that a little bit. Taylor Hendricks gets some love there, but the Thomson twins are probably most highly ranked across the board. So out of those names I just said to you, is there a standout there? Is there somebody that makes the most sense for the Houston Rockets, or just generally that might be your favorite player in that bunch?
Yeah, I think I'll actually start with who I'm hesitant about. I'm definitely extremely hesitant on the Thomson twins, and it's less about their style of play and everything, because I think they are freak athletes. They do a lot of great stuff, but like the level of competition in overtime elite is just like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure they're playing like elite prep schools and then some like international teams, like international club teams. And it just makes me hesitant, because think about how many high school players, which it's like a slight upgrade on high school, look phenomenal in their high school mixtapes, but like struggle in college. Like there's a bunch of players that were one and done this year that were like so highly rated coming out of high school that just like didn't really do it at the college level, or struggled, or just were like okay role players. Though I'm a little bit hesitant on them. Again, not because of their talent or athletic ability, but just like their level of competition. Someone who I really love in that range, though, Anthony Black, the guard from Arkansas. He's 6'7", almost 6'8", does play the one. Like, he doesn't do one thing like incredibly well, but he does everything like pretty damn well. Like he played UConn in the tournament, and like he just like can guard, he can play make, he like can get to the bucket. He had some pretty good, like, I don't think his shooting from 3-pointer was like anything to write home about, but he has good form and everything. But like he gets to the bucket, like he had some interesting little like post moves. He does everything really well, and I don't think he's going to be asked a lot of a rookie either. But I wouldn't be shocked at the end of the day if he averages like 10, 12 points, like 6 rebounds, 5 assists, stealing a half a game. Like, I wouldn't be shocked with that stat line from him. And I think he's one of those players, which, I love these types of players that like could go to a bad team and do that, or could go to a really good team and like do that. A couple years ago, like my guy for that, Evan Mobley, I was like, he could go to a bad team and contribute and do well, and he could go to a really good team and contribute and do well. I wouldn't be shocked. There's some talks now that he could be going like potentially even 5 or 6, when like before thought he was like maybe 8 to 10. I wouldn't be shocked if the Magic scoop him at 6. I was looking at their payroll today, and a lot of their guards, they have a plethora of guards, but a lot of them have 1 year left on their deal. I'm trying to think of the 2 offhand, but there's like 2 of their young guards.
Of which team?
The Magic.
Oh yeah, they have Fultz and Suggs.
Yes. Yeah. So like they're gonna need like a guard. Like again, rookie deals are 4 years, so like they're gonna need someone to kind of step in there. And like looking at the lineups of the Magic lately, like they love the tall players for their position. So
yeah. Dude, obviously, this is like the least shocking thing of this podcast so far. I also love Anthony Black. He's like my favorite guy in this draft right now. And when I say favorite, I don't mean that I think he's going to be the best player in the draft, obviously, right? But he's like my personal little favorite guy in this draft. And I look at this mock draft board here, or the draft order here. It doesn't make a lot of sense for Houston, though you could make the argument that Jalen Green needs a guy like that. You could make that argument actually pretty easily. I just don't think Houston will pull that trigger. I think he makes a lot of sense for Detroit, a lot of sense for Orlando, and maybe not Indiana at 7, but then Wizards, Jazz, Mavs all make sense to me. Maybe not the Mavs as much, because they're, with Luka, you don't need a guy who's going to handle the ball that much, and you need more of a shooter. He's not that guy. I love him for 5 and 6, and I think he might end up going in those spots. Dude, how many times are the Magic gonna select a guy with a long wingspan who's super athletic who can't shoot? What are they doing, right? Like Osir Thompson looked at to be in that range. He's a fantastic defender. Obviously, that's a big thing for them, but he plays the same position as Franz Wagner and Paolo Banchero. Like, what are the Magic going to do with another guy who can't shoot? Though I do love the Thompson twins for other reasons. I'll get to that in a minute. Like, I don't see that being a fit. Anthony Black is the Josh Giddey of this draft. Also, another comp for him has been Lonzo Ball, a guy who's a long guard. He passes the ball incredibly well. He makes the right passes. He moves the ball. He's not a pound it in the floor type of point guard either. Like, he is the type of guy who's not going to dribble the lights out just to find his shot. That's not his game. He's going to move the ball, run effective pick and roll, spot up in the corners. He even has a shot that kind of looks like Josh Giddey's. Like, it's almost like a miniature set shot. And Giddey proved that his shot can have some potential here, at least to be respectable enough for him to get off the dribble and score. And just like Scoot Henderson, Anthony Black was 58% at the rim in college. In a crowded type game that college basketball is, that's an impressive number to me. It's both hands around the rim. It's great passing. It's decent shooting. It's all the right things. And on top of that, he's looked at as one of the better defenders in this draft. I love Anthony Black, and I think that's the least shocking thing that's happened between you and I on this podcast so far, Glenn.
Yeah. And the name that I forgot earlier, the other Magic guard free agent next year is Cole Anthony. So he only has one more year left too. So him and Fultz have 1 year left. So it kind of makes sense that they're going to have to replenish at that position 2 years from now.
Right. So that's kind of my move. My mover is Anthony Black. I think he's projected in that 7 to 10 range, sometimes 12. I think he'll end up going 5 or 6. I think that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, and I think the Magic with their go ahead.
No, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, and the Magic have 2 picks, so obviously they need shooting, and they have a second lottery pick that they'll probably address shooting with.
Exactly. So they're at 11 as well, and Gradey Dick is in that range. Talk about a guy who can light it up and put the ball in the hoop. That's Gradey Dick. We'll get to him in a minute. Let's talk about the Thomson twins really quickly though, because they're looked at as the 4, 5, 6 range, both of them. Men Thomson is probably the more proven scorer of the bunch, just from a bag perspective. Right? Wait, no, I'm not.
Eamon's the better passer.
Okay. I confused my Thomson twins already. Look at that. Right, good start, Peter. But they both actually do show good playmaking skills, which is one of the things that when you have a guy who's not a knockdown shooter, and yes, they hit nice shots. If you look up their highlights in the Overtime Elite, they hit fadeaways over people, they hit pull-up threes. But like you said, Glenn, you nailed it. You can watch the highlight mixtape of anybody. You can watch Mitchell Robinson's off-season mixtape, and he's hitting step-back threes over his buddy's face in open gyms.
And watch Pete Kennedy's high school mixtape. Like,
maybe not that. I didn't even play basketball in high school, but maybe I hit some. Who's to say? They hit shots in the Overtime Elite. They don't project, especially early in their careers, as shooters at the next level. However, the fact that they show the feel to make the passes they do, to defend it the way that they do, like, they easily could have not cared about defense in the Overtime Elite. Both of them, right? Yeah, one's a little bit better at defense than the other. Both of them could have just mailed it in, averaged their 20 a game, put up gaudy numbers, sick highlight dunks, great passes, etc. But they actually kind of grinded on defense, and that's the thing that makes me feel good about them being in this mid-top 10 range, whereas in a world where that defense didn't seem like it mattered to them, and those other ancillary skills didn't seem like it mattered to them, I would be super hesitant. But with that being said, I think that their floors are decently high. I don't think either of them are going to be superstars, but they look like they can be, a 3-4 level starter on a decent team because of the athleticism, the versatility, what they can do passing the ball and in transition. That's an aspect of the game that a lot of teams are longing for.
Yeah, no really further comment on that other than, like, they are going to fit well on teams that are looking more 3-4 years down the line than 1-2 years down the line, which, like, I'm starting to see, like, I think the Magic are starting to turn into, like, looking at 1-2 years down the line rather than, again, that 3 or 4.
Right.
Because I think it's always frustrating for a team that you might draft a guy and develop him, but if it takes a couple years, rookie deals are 4 years long. So if they, like, have their breakout year 4, then it's like you had one great year of them and now you have to pay them a much bigger contract. So
yeah, by the time they hit, it's not worth it anymore, right? Like, yeah. By the time they hit, you're trading them already, and that's what the Magic can't afford at this point in time.
Yeah, and I think, like, a team like the Wizards, you can tell is, like, they're not that they're a great fit necessarily, not a bad fit, but, like, that's a team that's, like, going into, like, a multi-year rebuild right now. So
they can afford it. They can afford the time to let these guys kind of flourish. And and figure out the shot. And you know what? All the reports are that these guys are workers as well. Amen and Auxerre are working on their jump shot form and their grinders, and that's a good thing. You like to hear that. And obviously there's a lot of fluff in these times of reporting about all these prospects, but it seems pretty legit with these two. One more guy in this range I want to talk about who I actually do love, and I don't look at him as a surefire top-tier guy. I don't see him as an all-NBA type of guy, but I do see a very high floor with true starter upside. Maybe if his jump shot can actually turn into a three-point shot, he can be a near all-star level player, but I don't know if I project him that high. However, I still feel comfortable picking him in that 4 through 8 range, and that's Jarace Walker, Glenn. I like this dude a lot. Grinder on defense. Have you ever watched Kevon Looney's college tape at UCLA?
Like, out of all the many things I've watched in my life, Pete, like, that happens to be one of the few that I have not.
Well, Kevon Looney, for those of you guys who don't know, was like a number 1 level high school player. And then when he got injured after college, like, his game changed. And now he's like a more slow-footed center who's just cerebral and makes the right plays. We all know about Kevon Looney. But I watched Jarace Walker, and I'm like, oh, my God, he kind of even moves like Kevon Looney. Just hasn't had the injuries yet, so he's really athletic. A lot of people liken him to Jeremy Grant, and I don't know if that's good or bad or indifferent. If you want to draft Jeremy Grant,
I think a different player
at number
actually
5
is, but we can talk about that in a moment.
Yeah, hold that for a hot sec. I just see him as the type of guy who also is looked at as a top-level defender in this draft, who is going to help any single team that he's on, good, middle of the pack, or bad. He's a guy who makes an impact. It's kind of like, I didn't love Tari Eason in the draft last year, but watching him in Houston made me understand the Tari Eason effect. And I think that Jarace Walker, who from Houston University, is a very similar mold. He's long, he's athletic as hell, he can actually do a few things with the basketball. His shot looks like it has something there. And I'm a Jarace Walker guy, Glenn. What's your comp for him?
This isn't my comp, but it's someone that I can't get out of my head when I watch him play, is Anthony Bennett.
Oh, no,
but not necessarily NBA Anthony Bennett, but like what they did in college. Right. I see a lot of overlap with, and like, again, it's just something that I can't get out of my head. The thing that I always need to remind myself of, like, I don't remember, or like I didn't look up beforehand, like Anthony Bennett's measurables, but Jarace Walker, like, is a lot long. His wingspan is so much longer than I actually, like, it doesn't look that long, but then I looked at, he's 6'7" and he has a 7'3" wingspan. So I think sometimes in college, there's players that might not have these crazy measurables that like play good defense, but in the NBA, like having great, like long arms and all that, like really does help when you're playing with like the best athletes in the world. So I'm not saying that he is Anthony Bennett, but it is something that I can't get out of my head.
No, that's totally fair. And if you went back and watched Anthony Bennett's college tape, it's so easy to say, oh, this guy's clearly going to be a bust in the NBA. But he was picked high for a reason. Even
and everyone talks about their NBA body. Same with Jarace Walker. It's like they're not too scrawny. Like they got an NBA ready body to like bang around and like compete. Has like a decent touch, but then like it can always go in a variety of ways.
Yeah, and I think I was saying this before we started recording, so I should say it now. I meant to say it earlier. One thing that I do kind of look at when I'm watching these guys and reading about these guys is the weaknesses, right? Because you could be really good at one thing, and sometimes that's enough to get you in a rotation that matters, right? Look at Duncan Robinson. He was so elite at off-ball movement in the playoffs that he played his way back into the rotation because that dude had a bad season, and then he freaking carried them for multiple games in the biggest moments of the playoffs because he was elite at off-ball movement and shooting. That was backdoor cuts as well. So don't like say he just shot, right? Jarace Walker, this is why I say I don't see him as like an all-NBA type player, maybe an all-defense guy at some point, right? What are his weaknesses? His three is improved but still unproven. Okay, we can live with that. His for his strength and his size, people say that he didn't get to the rim enough and he settled for too many floaters and things of that nature. That's okay. He's pretty good at those. And his handle's a bit loose. right? That's what I'm reading as his weaknesses right here. Those are things that I'm okay with a power forward. If he's going to be an absolute grinder on defense, he's a sneaky, nice passer and ball mover. He's a good pick and roll guy. He can get up and throw down. Like, those are things that are transferable no matter what, right? So I can see him never being a number 1 or number 2 option, but just one of those guys who you look at and say, I am comfortable with him out there. He's making the right plays. And yeah, he has a few weaknesses. His jump shot's not as great as it should be, but he could hit a couple, and he's really useful for our team. So that's kind of where I land on Jarace Walker. I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that. We can move on.
No, I just think, to your point, like, he's not going to be your – I think he's, like, probably best as, like, a 3 on a team. And, like, I think teams that he would fit well on are the Pistons and Pacers.
Yeah,
they
Pacers
have, like,
for sure.
established playmakers on the team. They have people that play bigger, people that, like, handle. So, like, he kind of fits well in the middle space. He's never going to be that transformational wing that we were kind of talking about earlier with Brennan Miller and, like, the wings that can carry a team to the playoffs, but he can certainly be a great, like, third piece on a team. On a good team.
Like, I could see him being the pick and roll man with Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey. I could see him with Tyrese Halliburton looking really good in that role there. I don't see him next to Paolo and Franz, right? So I agree with you completely. I hope if he goes in this top 5 through 10 range, that it is a Pacers fit rather than a Magic fit for him specifically. But all right, let's move on to get some more prospects here. Another guy who's been bouncing around the lottery here from very high to low lottery to everywhere in between. It's Villanova's own Cam Whitmore, who I have mixed feelings about, Glenn, so I want you to go first on Cam Whitmore. What are your thoughts? Because there's a lot of varying reporting going on about his talents and what he can bring to the NBA.
Yeah, no, like... It's funny that I think Anthony Bennett with Jarace Walker, and I don't think of it for Cam Whitmore. I really do like him. He's an athletic, and he's a really young wing. I think he might be one of the youngest guys in the draft this year. Like, NBA body, like, has good form. Not that he was a knockdown three-point shooter, but certainly got better throughout the year. Can play well on defense. Kind of like a good glue on one of these teams that need someone to kind of play the wing and handle some of these more dominant wing players on other teams. So I personally like him. I think, again, like, him and Jarace Walker, like, it's going to be teams have individual workouts with players for a reason. I think some teams are going to fall in love with one. Some other teams will fall in love with the other.
Yeah, I see Cam Whitmore, and my basketball brain just keeps telling me, like, he's going to average, 16 points per game as a young man and make some really impressive shots and drives to the rim, and it's not going to be relevant. Like, it's going to be an irrelevant, empty stat type of guy. And, yeah, of course, young players always have the ability to improve, but his lack of playmaking and feel for that part of the game really makes me nervous. Like, a lot of guys can light it up. Bill Simmons says it all the time. How many guys in the NBA, if given the reins to a bad team, can average 22 points per game? That list is a lot higher than it ever was before, and it's way higher than most people would probably guess. There might be 5 guys on every team, if given enough shots and opportunity, who can average 20 points per game. But a lot of those guys wouldn't be contributing to winning. And unfortunately for Cam Whitmore, that's kind of what I see there, right? Like, you watch his stuff, you see great dunks, great drives, some good shooting, all this ability, good size, super young, like you said, and you look at less than 1 assist per game, and you look at some tunnel vision when you watch his extended clips and just trying to get buckets, and maybe that's what they asked him to do at Villanova. Maybe that's just who he is. I'm kind of leaning there.
I think, to your point, though, of, like, getting some empty points, like, I think there's a lot of players that get that early on in their career when they are on a bad team, and then either the dynamic of their team changes of, like, becoming a better team, or they sign somewhere else, get traded, whatever it may be, and you really see they're a big-time contributor on a better team, or I guess a contributor on a better team, but in a much different role. Like, not the perfect comp for him, but, like, think about Saddiq Bey. He was, like, putting up kind of garbage numbers for Detroit, and, like, obviously the Hawks valued him enough to trade for him. Certainly a part of that was, like, his contract situation of it being on his rookie deal and everything. But you can kind of see, like, I kind of see him in that way of, like, Saddiq, also a Villanova guy himself, but, like, a Miles Bridges, like, a contributing wing that, like, maybe on a contender is like coming off the bench, maybe like
Right.
is the first guy off as a starter. Like, but I think for him, it's really going to matter on like where he goes, and time will tell.
He's definitely one of the guys that fit is incredibly important, like so important. You think about the Andrew Wiggins effect and Aaron Gordon effect. Like those guys were floating into never ever land before they landed on great franchises, right? Wiggins was obviously a disappointment in Minnesota, despite putting up some great numbers at different moments in time, and then goes to Golden State. His defense shined, his shooting shined, his ability to be a secondary, tertiary playmaker shined, and he was a key cog in a championship. Aaron Gordon, irrelevant in Orlando, just couldn't get right, couldn't shoot good enough, couldn't create good enough, couldn't do anything but dunk good enough. Then he goes and plays with Nikola Jokic. His field goal percentage went through the roof. He's a great defender. He's a finisher. He's playmaking a little bit, right? Like, that was crazy, the different player that Aaron Gordon became. So, yes, Cam Whitmore goes to one of those teams that has a good spot for him and kind of develop him right. You know, the Jazz do a good job with development. Maybe that would make sense for them. The maybe being around Luka Doncic would be good for him because he wouldn't be asked to do too much with the ball. But if he goes to a team like the Wizards, I'd be really nervous. I'd be really nervous that by the time he figures it out, he's off your team, right?
Yeah.
Like that happens way too often. I think that's a great comp and great call by you. Let's run through some other players here, Glenn, as before we go too long here. Just going to name a couple guys. These are a couple bigs here for you to talk about quickly. Do you have any takes? I'm finding it hard to have strong opinions on these guys. Taylor Hendricks and Derek Lively. Taylor Hendricks out of UCF, Lively out of Duke. I mean, these look like classic guys to me. Go ahead. Before I even pontificate, just
Sorry,
to go ahead.
Go.
No, I was just going to say they're just classic guys who are big athletes who do a few things decent, and they're just going to be very, very normal in the league. Very, very normal players.
I actually have different take than you on this one, so glad we have some differences this time. I'm a big Taylor Hendricks guy. I am hesitant on Derek Lively. I think Derek Lively is shooting up boards of a big-time prospect. I think he was number 2 out of high school. That is rising in his workouts. One of the things I was reading the other day, it's like teams are wowed by his three-point shooting in his workouts. The dude averaged like 5.5 points at Duke last year as the number 2 overall pick or overall recruit. Like, it's just like the classic like workout warrior that is rising. Not saying there's certainly been plenty of players that have performed much better on the NBA level than in the college level. And not saying that he doesn't have a lot of tools, but like he went from like end of the first round to like potentially top 12 now, which I'm just like step on the brakes a little bit on that one. Taylor Hendricks, on the other hand, I actually am a big fan of. Contrary to your comp for Jarace Walker, Jeremy Grant, I actually think Taylor Hendricks reminds me a little bit of a Jeremy Grant, Christian Wood type of mold. If you could combine them together, like I think what he did, obviously at University of Central Florida, it isn't the highest level of competition, but still like, what are they, AAC? Like he did a lot of great things that are impactful in today's NBA. Like a 3-and-D, like tall wing is like super valuable on teams these days. He shot almost 40% as a 6'9" rangy guy with still like a good field goal percentage as well. I really do like him. I think he fits well with any of the teams that need a wing that we kind of were talking about. The Pistons, the Pacers, Jazz. I really think the Mavericks will trade their pick, but like if they stay put, like obviously seems like there's going to be a little bit of a divorce between them and Christian Wood, so he could kind of come in and fill that role. I really do like Taylor Hendricks, but at least his upside.
I'm higher on Hendricks than Lively, for the record. I do think the shooting will bode well because, you know, the big thing with prospects with NBA is if they shoot free throws well and they shoot threes well, you can project with more confidence that they're going to shoot threes well at the next level. And he shot free throws at a 78% clip, so that 39%, 40% from three doesn't seem fluky. It doesn't seem like a college number because the touch seems like it makes sense. What makes me nervous is like he didn't do well inside the paint. Right, he shot 40% from three, and he shot 47% overall. He wasn't getting inside the paint a lot. He really shot half of his field goal attempts, more or less, from three. And you're right, maybe that fits perfectly for a lot of teams. A lot of teams like those wings who can let it fly and do some good things. He's a decent passer. I do like Hendricks more than Lively. Lively's just like so whatever to me. Like he can be the backup center on.
He's Mitch Robinson.
20. Wow, come on. That's just rude, bro. That's just rude. Right in my face, you're going to come out here and say Mitch Robinson is going to be irrelevant? Come on now.
No, I think Derek Lively has would hope to be Mitch Robinson.
No, it's very fair, and he really could be, right? Like he's huge.
Seems like he has a little bit of a better shooting touch than Mitch, but like,
yeah, because Mitch can't really do anything
that
once he gets the
stat
ball.
line at least of like points and rebounds and blocks, I think is the best case.
No,
for
it is. It's definitely Mitch Robinson-esque, and he also could be the type of player who benefits from more space, where his rim runs mean more at the NBA level because there's no one. There's not 4 dudes in the paint and like it is in college, which just drives me nuts sometimes when I watch college basketball. But again, I'm just like not blown away. So if you're looking for a guy to be a mediocre center, then Derek Lively is going to be your guy for sure. I hate using that at number 10. But then again, if he's projected to go 10 and play with Luka, he might look like Tyson Chandler next year, right? So I could just look like an idiot if he goes to that perfect situation. But let's keep moving here. Let's talk about a few more guys. Here's some more guard wing type players who are of interest in this lottery range. One guy's been getting talked about a good bit who has some really nice skill sets here. That's Kobe Buffkin, also Gradey Dick, Jalen Hood-Schifino. These guys are all dudes who have some playmaking chops. Gradey Dick's a guy who is going to be pigeonholed as a shooter, but he can do more than just shoot, right? So there's some interesting players here in this late lottery, and seemingly, Glenn, every year, you look back to some of these other drafts, and you look at an AJ Griffin at 16 who looked like he showed some good things in Atlanta. You look back to 2021 and Corey Kispert started shooting the lights out. Chris Duarte came off super hot to start off his career. Right, there are guys in this range who end up being big time players. Trey Murphy, another dude last year who ended up being huge, right? So any of these guys, Kobe Buffkin, Schifino, or Gradey Dick jump out to you?
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with Gradey Dick. Like, people think that he's just a shooter, partially because he's pastier than Colgate toothpaste. But if you actually watched Kansas games, like, he did a lot more. Like, I forget there was one game I watched where he had this like crazy backdoor cut and like got to the hoop. Like, I think the Kevin Huerter comparison isn't terrible because Kevin Huerter also does a lot more than just shoot the basketball, which I think, again, it's going to be his bread and butter. But I think Gradey Dick is not Duncan Robinson. Like, he's not, obviously Duncan Robinson has great off-ball movement, but like Duncan Robinson's kind of a one-trick pony with shooting, where like he can do a lot more.
He dribbles once at most.
Yeah.
Duncan
In the
Robinson's
playoffs, he
a
got
one
the
dribble
rim
at
a little
most.
bit too much.
Sneaky,
for a Celtics fan. He got the rim a little too much. But I do like Gradey Dick a lot. I think some teams are going to be fighting to trade up ahead of another team from like 8 to 12 probably to try to get him. I don't think I said this.
I'd love to.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I don't think I said this at the top either, but I think there's going to be a lot more trade. Like, obviously, every year there's a ton of trades, like end of the lottery through the end of the first or even in the second round. I think this year there's actually going to be a lot more trades like early on as well.
Yeah, I agree, because I think like Oklahoma City Thunder, right? They have all this capital. They have all this opportunity to move stuff around. Gradey Dick would make great sense for them, right? Just one more guy who can slash and shoot and make his own shot a little bit, but also spot up, right? Like, he's kind of that perfect combo. You put him next to Shea and Giddey, guess what? Now you can give Shea and Giddey like 5 minutes more of rest of game because they play so much already. And you can trust Gradey Dick to do a few things, right? Like, he fits great with the Thunder.
Same with the Magic.
If he's getting talked about, same with the Magic. If he's getting talked about now all of a sudden, like at 8, 9, 10, and OKC's sitting there at 12 being like, yo, we really want this guy. Let's scoot up. Let's Scoot Henderson right up a couple picks here and grab Gradey Dick. I could see him being one of those guys who wants to be got by a couple teams. I like him a lot as well. And he's also 6'7", right? Yeah. He's not small. He's not like a 6'3" guy. Like, even Austin Reeves, and now we're doing the white thing here again, but like Austin Reeves was a dog this year. He's like 6'4", 6'5". Grady Dick's 6'7", 6'8". Like, he's pretty big. And he can do some things. He can get busy. What about Kobe Buffkin out of Michigan, Glenn, the lefty?
I haven't watched much
good shades
on him at all. I feel like he's I'm reading now that he's like guaranteed lottery pick, which just I'm always a little bit hesitant on the guys that rise up like in the weeks leading up to the draft. I can't give you too much on him. I can give you a little bit more on Jalen Hood-Schifino from Indiana, the guard.
Hang tight on that.
Yeah.
I'll get to Schifino in a second. I'll just give this on Buffkin really quick. I saw like a little bit more of a zoomed up D'Angelo Russell, and that's a little lefty comp there for you. But he's got a wingspan, 6'4", 6'8" wingspan. He's long. He has like this little playmaking chop where he's making really nice cross-court passes, and he's slipping passes through defenders on pick and roll and finding people. He has a nice little step back. He can make a lot of shots. I kind of like what I'm seeing out of Kobe Buffkin. He's a sophomore, so you kind of always get a little nervous of like, okay, these sophomore year highlights, he had 1 year to get used to college, and now he really showed out and shot 36% on tough shots.
He is young
so I'm
for
a little
sophomore.
bit hesitant. Yes, he's still 19.
Yep.
But I always get a little hesitant when someone like really starts showing up in their second year, because you know the difference a year makes in college sometimes for some of these guys. But I like Kobe Buffkin. I think for certain teams in that range, he can be a nice piece. I think the rumor is that Toronto gave him a promise. So unless he goes ahead of 13, that Toronto might take him at 13. That's like a nice little Twitter rumor for Kobe Buffkin. But go ahead on Jalen Hood.
That's funny you actually mentioned that, because I did not see that, but I thought Jalen Hood-Schifino would be great for the Raptors. I feel like they love these, like, Jalen isn't he's not short for a guard, but like isn't one of these crazy tall guards, but they just love, like, he's still big for a guard. They love those types of players. If you want to talk about him a little bit more as well.
I don't have, just like you didn't have a strong Kobe Buffkin stance, I don't have a strong Jalen Hood-Schifino stance. I really don't. I mean, he's kind of one of those guys who flashes a little bit of a lot, but doesn't have, to me, he doesn't have a surefire strength. And I know I talked about weaknesses before. He doesn't really have, he doesn't have a ton of weaknesses, but then you look at the strengths, and he doesn't have like super standout strengths either, right? Like he passed pretty well, he shot pretty well.
Think if you had to pick chops, one, it would maybe be defense. But again, it's still not one that's screaming like this is my best skill.
And he's got one of those crazy wingspans too, 6'4" with a 6'10" wingspan. I mean, he's another one of those guys. Like Nickeil Alexander-Walker comes to mind a little bit as well for someone like this, and not really from a play style, but from a prospect style. It's like, oh, this guy is going to grind. He could play defense. He actually has some offensive skills. But I'm a little bit concerned that it'll come together for him more so than Kobe, whose like shot just looks really smooth. Looks like he can get buckets at the next level and help teams out right away. Where Schifino seems like the type of guy who might take a little bit longer to get comfortable on offense. And hopefully his defense is good enough to keep him, in rotations and et cetera. But that's the benefit of going in the lottery. And, you look at kind of the teams in that range where he's projected, 10 through 18. The Raptors make sense. The Pelicans could make sense. The Hawks might make a little sense. I don't know. But there's definitely opportunities there. Let's move on to a UConn guy, Glenn. Very close to home for you. I don't know how you feel about Mr. Jordan Hawkins, but I'm sure you have some sort of opinion, as he is the most highly touted UConn man in this draft. So what's your take on Jordan Hawkins?
I think, obviously he's a phenomenal shooter. He actually, more than anyone, probably reminds me of Duncan Robinson because his off-ball movement coming off screens is, like, incredible. Like, obviously I've watched most UConn games, and, like, it was just smooth, him coming around, catch and shoot off screens. I'm just a little, like, worried that, like, most guys in this range of, like, maybe 13 to 25 of, like, I could see some of these guys, like, doing decent, and then some, like, I also can see the same guy, and, like, I could see them fall out of rotation within a year or two. Like, so I think he just is a bit of a one-trick pony in the sense of, like, his defense is not great. Like, he doesn't really do much else than just shoot. So,
And he might be amazing at shooting, though. Like, he's
Yeah.
88% free throw shooter,
he
40% threes. But, you know,
But
here's all
James
you need to know
Bouknight from
about
UConn was like a lottery pick too, and like I was like, this guy got NBA handles. And
you know,
then
I was
like,
out on him the whole time.
yes,
You know, I've been
I know.
out on Bouknight. But he
But
was
guys
also,
in this
he didn't
range
shoot
just can
well.
fizzle out. Like they not even fizzle out, might never really get into the rotation. And like I could just see him lighting up the G League and just like being one of those guys that do phenomenal, but like never can.
I mean, Bouknight to me, like he wasn't a good shooter. He was a theoretical shooter, and it didn't. Well, I shouldn't say never. It hasn't panned out yet. His athleticism was great. He wasn't very big, and he was also in a bad situation in Charlotte.
And I've seen some interviews of he's one of the hardest guys to cover in the G League because he has like a crazy first step and his handle's amazing.
He's got a bag.
Yeah, but then it's just like it's not the skills that you need to actually be an NBA guy. So.
Yeah, it's like when Joe Schmo from the NBA goes to the China League and fucking averages a triple-double, right? Like, yeah, all right, like we see it. But here's all you need to know about Jordan Hawkins. You look at the Ringer NBA draft guide with the guide, which is the big board by Kevin O'Connor, a guy who I listen to all the time. He has Jordan Hawkins at 26. And then you look at Tankathon or NBA, and Jordan Hawkins is at 15 on Tankathon, and he's at 16 on ESPN. Right, so he is one of the guys who's actually getting hurt by the weak draft class. Right, so if he gets drafted 14th, you look at him as a guy who should contribute. But in reality, in a better draft class, he gets drafted 25 through 35, and it's icing on the cake, and he could be the 14th guy on a bench. And then all of a sudden, midway through the year, a couple injuries, and he's shooting 40% from three.
Yeah, it's a
and oh my God,
surprise.
Jordan Hawkins in rotation. Yeah, right. So he's going to get hurt by his draft pick if he gets picked too early. So I agree. I mean, the shooting is unmatched. You can't really question it with Jordan Hawkins. All right. I don't want to go through like a ton more specific players, Glenn, because we're already at an hour plus here on this podcast. So let me just ask you: is there anyone in the lottery or just post lottery range that we've missed that we haven't covered that you feel like you'd like to bring up?
This year, like, I don't have a ton. Like, to your point, I think it's a little bit of a weak draft class. I think there's a weird mix this year of, like, very, very highly recruited high school players that didn't do that well in college. And then also some, like, 4-year player or, like, very experienced college players that are in here that you're just, like, they were good in college, but, like, second-round pick, like, you never really know. I can rattle off some names that fall into both buckets, but like Nick Smith, the guard in Arkansas, Dariq Whitehead, the wing at Duke, G.G. Jackson, the forward at South Carolina, Amani Bates. Like these are guys that were really highly touted coming out of high school. Amari Bailey, but like they just didn't really put it together in their 1-year college, and I think they could have really benefited by going back, but didn't. But then you got some guys that like you're just like you're really old, like Keontae Johnson from Kansas State, which like doesn't mean he can't be a contributor, but like you just really don't know. Like you got Jaime Vasquez from UCLA, Chris Murray, Keegan Murray's brother. You just got like a weird mix of players that I'm just like, it could really go either way on, but I really don't feel confident one way or another. I guess if I had to pick one, I think he should have gone back to school for another year, but like I still like he's very raw now, but a couple years, who knows? Noah Clowney from Alabama. The forward. He's what I think might be the youngest guy in the draft because he's still 18. And was playing in the shadows of Brandon Miller there, but like great potential as like a 3-and-D forward. But again, just like super raw, needs to put on a lot of muscle.
And just like every year, but it's ultra magnified this year, so many of these dudes are going to be based off of where they get drafted and draft grades, which is the most exciting thing on Friday and through the weekend and into next week. You know, if Amani Bates gets drafted by the Warriors in the second round, right? Like people are going to say, crazy. Oh my God, the Warriors just stole another one, right? But like if he gets drafted by like some crack team, like if he gets drafted by the Hornets at 41, oh, you know, it's a flyer. Who cares if he sucks? right? Like that's
Oh
this,
yeah,
it's going to be
people went
completely opposite
crazy
ends of the spectrum.
when Patrick Baldwin got drafted by the Warriors last year.
Yeah.
For most NBA fans, they have no clue who he was, but he was like a top 10 like recruited guy, and they're like he didn't do well in his 1 year college, and everyone's like, but the Warriors are going to like be able to like bring it all together for him, which like that isn't always the case. So
Meanwhile, they still haven't figured out Moody and Kuminga,
yeah,
right? Like they still haven't even figured out those guys. I do kind of like Jaime Jaquez. Like I think there's a role for him in the NBA. He's one of those guys who's never gonna like have a ceiling that's higher than what we all think it could be, but he could find a role in the league, right? Like he's got good size. His shooting is clearly very, very solid. Like there's these dudes that as long as they can kind of hold up on defense, if they can just kind of do it, they're going to be contributors, right? Like he's kind of like this weird sized player who played like a power forward in college a little bit, but also was like a true wing who handled the ball. So it's very strange, but he was super well positioned, a grinder on defense in college. I mean, like his advanced stats for college were fantastic, but how do you even look at that and compare it to anything, because he was a senior, right? Like it's a completely different game at that point, but he's a good free throw shooter. He has the potential to get the range out a little bit more. If he goes to a team, maybe he can do something. Same for Chris Murray. Honestly, Chris Murray is a very similar type of prospect, in my opinion, where, you know, he's kind of a 3, he's kind of a 4, but, you know, all of a sudden his shot looks good at the next level, and you're thinking to yourself, like, damn, how did this guy go 24? Like, this guy can let it rip.
I love his fit with the Kings with his twin brother Keegan Murray. So like, I'd love to see that happen. I think he'll learn so much from his brother about like how to develop his game to be meaningful at the NBA level.
Yeah, I mean, and he shot decent in college, right? He was a mid-30s, but a high free throw percentage guy. You know, you project that pretty well. But you never know. He could be an end-of-bench guy for his entire career, or if that shot gets a little better, all of a sudden he's a 16-minute per game type of guy. So yeah. All right. Anyone else? Glenn? Any other? What about the other UConn guys?
Yeah, the other UConn guys I just don't think are like Andre Jackson Jr. I really like thought should have gone back to school. Like people were talking about first round pick earlier in the season, and because 2 years ago he kind of had fluky good shooting from 3, but like he doesn't even have the shooting mechanics. And Adama Sanogo, like everyone who watched March Madness probably loved his post game and his footwork, but like see you overseas, buddy. Sad to say it. One other guy though, which I'm sure you've probably seen on the Ringer too, Ben Shepherd, the wing from Belmont. Like I know it says this is the comp on there, but like I really do see it. But like he does have like the Quentin Grimes comparison of just like a little bit of a like from a muscular perspective, bigger guard that can shoot the ball really well. Like don't expect him to come in doing that on like a good team early on, but like a middle of the pack team that like needs that 8th guy or 3rd guy off the bench, 4th guy off the bench. There's some potential there.
Ben Shepherd is the classic 35th pick who is a rotation player in his first year because he plays really hard on defense and can shoot and has a sneaky knack for slashing, which is literally Quentin Grimes. Like Quentin Grimes, he gets out there and he's a good defender. He can shoot very well, and he surprises people constantly with the catch and go stuff, right? Like Quentin Grimes, Knicks fans know this more than others. Like Knicks fans almost look at Grimes as more untouchable than RJ Barrett. A part of that's because of contract timetables, but also because he's just a more efficient, compact player. And like Shepherd can be a dude who is getting real minutes for a decent team in his first year, and he'll never average more than 18 points a game or even 14 points a game for that matter. But he's a real player. And then you get, 6'5" with a 7'9" wingspan guard who can't shoot but can dunk on people. And it's like, oh my God, we got this guy at 17. He could be something, and he'll never be anything, right?
Yeah.
Like it's the classic case every single year. It's the Josh Hart. I mean, you would go back to all the Villanova guys, right? It's Josh Hart. It's Jalen Brunson. Like it's Mikal Bridges was a much higher pick, but it's these types of guys who, like, you think, oh, I know exactly where their ceiling is, and it's not that high, and then you realize that their ceiling is just high enough for what it needs to be. I mean, Jalen Brunson kind of broke through that pretty hard, but
and it's really funny. I know we don't have any NBA prospects probably listening to the pod, but for the Knicks fans who listen to the pod, like that might not know this, but like Quentin Grimes was a really highly recruited player coming out of high school, went to Kansas for a year, and actually was one of those guys that like didn't have a great first year, but was like, you know what? Like I was so highly recruited, like I'm going to test the draft pools. And like, there's a lot of guys who are like, you know what? Even though I didn't play well, I'm still going to go in because I'm going to be a fringe first round or second round pick. He was like, you know what? I'm going to transfer, go to school that I can develop my skills that will translate to the NBA. Did 2 years at Houston and then came out as a late first round pick, which like he may have not been that, and he wouldn't be where he is today if he didn't do that. So I don't know if I was ever had the opportunity to give advice to players that like were in a similar position. It's like sometimes it is better to go back to school, especially with like the NIL era.
And Quentin Grimes will be in the league for 15 years.
And I don't think that would have been the case if he declared for the draft coming out of Kansas after one struggle of a year.
Yeah. Do we want to give a chance on pronouncing Kabulie's name? Koulibaly? Koulibaly?
Let's just say Wemby's club teammate.
Yes. Bilal. We'll just go with Bilal. I think it's Koulibaly. I think I got that right. Bilal Koulibaly. Super big, 6'8", not super big like Wemby's big, but big man, very athletic, like, you know, does some things, but any interest there, or do you think that's a little Wemby boost, if you will? Just by being near Wemby, he got boosted.
And you and I were chatting about this before we started the pod, but like a classic guy that's like now getting pushed up draft boards in the weeks leading up to the draft, which now I've said it for the third time. I am not a big fan of those prospects. I do really like the rumor of that if the Spurs have interest in trading back into the lottery to draft him, which like I think they're doing that more to help Wembanyama feel comfortable and like have someone he knows as support around him, which I think is like really smart to do with a prospect like that, rather than like they think he is like a generational talent. And maybe playing with Wemby could help unlock that a little bit, but like I just give the yellow flag to teams in the late lottery of like cool down a little bit. Like he definitely would need some time and like the right situation, but I'm not too big on him.
Yeah, he's not Jeremy Sohan. You know, I think a lot of people want to say that he's Sohan, right? Because he has like the same build and stuff like that. But the Sohans of the world are like the anomalies where, you know, if you think about Sohan's strengths, you can't really prove most of them by statistics. You just watch him and say, oh, he's making an impact like every single time he's out there. And yeah, I don't know if you can bank on that with most prospects. You couldn't even bank on that with Sohan, right? Like he was picked in the middle of the lottery for a reason. So I don't know. All right, Glenn, let's do this before we go. Can you on the spot, and I'm going to elongate my question to give you a second here. Can you shoot your shot right now? I don't care what it is. Just shoot your shot on one thing that you will think that's going to happen tomorrow or tonight on Thursday night. That's not a top 3 related pick, and really just that. Can you shoot your shot on a non-top 3 prediction for NBA draft night? It could be a trade, a specific guy to a specific team, or anything in between.
All right, I'm going to try to shoot my shot on this one. I would not be shocked if the Atlanta Hawks trade one of DeAndre Hunter, Clint Capella, or John Collins. Obviously not all 3, but I would not be shocked if one of them are on the move.
Okay. I thought you were going to say trade Trae Young, but I guess not.
Yeah, I don't think that'll happen.
What if they traded Trae Young for like this? Would he be enough for number 2? Would Trae Young give Charlotte? Nah, Charlotte wouldn't want Trae Young, right?
Yeah.
Like, is that weird that Trae Young has no like he couldn't even get a top like 5 pick probably?
Yeah, and you got to think about it from like the contracts perspective. Trae's is in his first year now, or just completed his first year of like his extension of $30 million or whatever it is. So
yeah. Okay, my shot that I'm shooting, I'm going to shoot 2 smaller shots. I'm going to take 2 elbow jumpers right here. I'm going right off the rip, and I'm saying Anthony Black to Orlando, and it's going to be wonderful. Can't wait for Anthony Black to Orlando. And then I'm going with Gradey Dick to Oklahoma City at 12. Shooting my shot right there with 2 guys who I really like in this draft, and I think Black's going to be a Magic, and Dick's going to be a Thunder. That's my shot.
You really don't want the the Suggs Dick combination for the Magic.
I kind of do that.
I like both your takes there, and for shooting your shot. I will also put in a second that I think maybe both, but definitely one. You'll see a team jump another team to draft Anthony Black or Gradey Dick.
Yes, I agree. I think that's very, very possible. I wouldn't be surprised if Orlando trades up to 5, just flops with Detroit to get Anthony Black. I think he's such a great fit for them. And then the Pistons probably end up getting they play a little coy with the Anthony Black situation. I think that's great.
Yeah.
Really quick. Last thing. Sorry. Lakers are at 17. Do they make that pick? Yes or no?
I'm gonna say no.
Do you think they trade up, down, or out?
I feel like out.
Mm-hmm. I think I agree.
The thing that I do not know what's going on is obviously at the top you mentioned the Nuggets trading back into the end of the first, but they made a second trade up into the first. They're scheming for something. I don't know what.
The Nuggets currently have 29, 32, 37.
They're going to trade up.
They're going to try and package that for somebody. They're going to try to get whoever their guy is. I don't know who it is in the draft. Bruce Brown, they might not be able to bring back Bruce Brown. And maybe they're a player for Mr. Dick. Would Mr. Dick fit that role a little bit? A little bit of dynamic difference between Bruce Brown?
I don't think Mr. Dick would fit in there.
Oh, my God. I think that means that it's time to say goodbye after that one. Hold on. I just got to play this sound for all of us to hear this.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Mr. Dick, we appreciate you. Glynn Johnson, we appreciate you. And after that, I think I have nothing else to say. So, Glenn.
Thank you for having me, Pete.
Do you have any last words?
Always a pleasure.
Oh, of course. Thanks for staying up with me, even
Talk
though
to you in
you're battling
approximately
through.
1 year from now.
I'll talk to you in 364 days.
Yes.
All right, dude. I appreciate you, and I will talk to you soon. I'll be texting you, I'm sure, throughout the entire draft tonight, so I look forward to it.
All right. Take care.
Subway Sports Talk. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, review. You know what to do. Apple Podcast app, Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. Just do it. Just get on there on the Subway Sports Talk train and stay off the Mr. Dick, perhaps. I don't know. It's up to you. Cheers.